It was a warm summer night, and a group of teenagers decided to explore the abandoned amusement park on the outskirts of town. The park had been closed for years, but the attractions were still standing, rusted and decrepit. As they entered the park, they were met with an unsettling silence. The rides creaked and groaned in the breeze, and the once bright lights flickered dimly. As they explored the park, they began to feel like they were being watched. They could hear whispers in the wind and see shadows moving in the corners of their eyes. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, its eyes glowing with a sinister light. It was a clown, with an eerie smile and a twisted laugh. The teenagers tried to run, but they found themselves trapped in the park. The clown seemed to be everywhere, lurking in the shadows and stalking them relentlessly. As the night wore on, the teenagers realized that they were not alone in the park. The clowns had taken over, and they were the only ones left. They tried to fight back, but it was too late. The clowns had already taken control, and they were not going to let anyone leave the park alive. The teenagers were trapped, at the mercy of the twisted clowns in the abandoned amusement park. The teenagers tried to find a way out, but the clowns seemed to be one step ahead of them. They were always waiting in the shadows, ready to strike at any moment. As the night went on, the teenagers began to lose hope. They were exhausted, scared, and trapped. They knew that they were no match for the clowns, and they were running out of options. Just when it seemed like all was lost, they stumbled upon a hidden room in the depths of the park. It was dark and cramped, but it seemed to be their only chance. They barricaded themselves inside and waited, their hearts pounding with fear. They could hear the clowns outside, searching for them, but they remained hidden in the darkness. Hours passed, and the clowns finally gave up their search. The teenagers emerged from the room, shaken but alive. As they made their way out of the park, they could still hear the faint sounds of laughter and whispers in the wind. They knew that the clowns were still out there, waiting for their next victims. From that night on, the teenagers never spoke of the abandoned amusement park again. They knew that they had narrowly escaped with their lives, and they would never forget the horror of the clowns that had taken over the park. Despite their best efforts to forget about the abandoned amusement park, the teenagers could not shake the memory of the clowns that had haunted them that fateful night. They found themselves plagued by nightmares, unable to sleep or concentrate on anything else. As days turned into weeks and weeks turned into months, the teenagers began to notice that something was not right. They felt like they were being followed, like the clowns were still watching them, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. One by one, the teenagers began to disappear. They would vanish without a trace, leaving behind no clues or evidence. The police were baffled, and the townspeople began to whisper about the curse of the abandoned amusement park. The last remaining teenager, a girl named Emily, knew that she was next. She could feel the presence of the clowns everywhere she went, their laughter echoing in her ears. Desperate for answers, Emily returned to the abandoned amusement park, hoping to find a clue that would lead her to the truth. As she searched through the empty rides and attractions, she stumbled upon a hidden underground chamber. Inside, she found a series of twisted and terrifying clown masks, each one more grotesque than the last. And at the center of the room, she found the source of the curse, a portal to another dimension, filled with the evil spirits of the clowns that had once inhabited the park. With a newfound sense of determination, Emily destroyed the portal, sealing away the evil spirits and breaking the curse. The missing teenagers were never found, but Emily knew that they were at peace, their spirits finally released from the clutches of the clowns. As for Emily, she returned to her normal life, forever changed by the horror she had witnessed. She knew that she would never forget the abandoned amusement park, or the twisted clowns that had haunted her nightmares for so long. But as time passed, Emily began to notice strange things happening around her. She would see glimpses of clown masks out of the corner of her eye, and hear whispers in the wind that she couldn't explain. The nightmares returned, more vivid and terrifying than ever before. She knew that the curse of the abandoned amusement park had not truly been broken, and that the clowns were still after her. Determined to put an end to the curse once and for all, Emily returned to the park once again. She knew that she had to find a way to permanently banish the evil spirits that haunted her. As she searched through the park, she found a small, forgotten shrine hidden deep in the woods. It was covered in strange symbols and markings, and seemed to radiate an otherworldly energy. With nothing left to lose, Emily approached the shrine, chanting the words that she had memorized from an old book of spells. Suddenly, the ground began to shake, and a bright light filled the air. When Emily opened her eyes again, she found herself standing in the center of the abandoned amusement park. But something was different. The rides were no longer rusted and decayed, and the lights shone brightly once again. The curse had been broken, and the park had been restored to its former glory. Emily knew that she had succeeded, and that the clowns were no longer a threat to anyone. As she walked out of the park, Emily felt a sense of peace wash over her. The nightmares were gone, and the curse had been lifted. The abandoned amusement park was no longer haunted, and Emily knew that she had finally put an end to the horror that had plagued the town for so long. Days turned into weeks, and Emily began to settle back into her normal life. She no longer heard whispers in the wind, and the clown masks no longer appeared before her eyes. It was as if the curse had never existed. But as time went on, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. She began to feel like she was being watched, like there was something lurking in the shadows just out of sight. One night, as she was walking home from a friend's house, Emily heard the sound of footsteps behind her. She turned around, but there was no one there. Suddenly, she felt a cold hand grab her shoulder, and she turned to see a familiar face, one of the clowns from the abandoned amusement park. Emily tried to run, but the clown was too fast. It chased her through the streets, laughing and cackling all the while. Emily knew that she was trapped, and that there was no way out. Just when she thought it was all over, Emily stumbled upon a hidden alleyway. She dove inside, hoping to find some way to escape. As she looked around, she realized that she had stumbled upon another portal, one that led to another dimension, even darker and more twisted than the one she had seen before. Emily knew that she had to act fast. She grabbed a nearby rock and smashed the portal, destroying it once and for all. The clown disappeared into thin air, and Emily was left standing alone in the alleyway. She knew that the curse had finally been lifted, and that the clowns were no longer a threat to anyone. But as she walked away, Emily couldn't help but wonder, was this truly the end of the horror that had plagued her for so long, or was there something even darker lurking just around the corner? Months passed, and Emily tried her best to move on from the horror that had consumed her life. She no longer heard whispers in the wind, and the clown masks no longer appeared before her eyes. She even began to enjoy going to amusement parks again, something that she had not done since that fateful night at the abandoned park. But one day, as she was riding a roller coaster, Emily felt a sudden jolt. The ride screeched to a halt, and Emily was left hanging upside down, suspended in mid-air. As she looked around, she realized that something was wrong. The people around her were no longer normal amusement park goers, they were clowns, each one more twisted and terrifying than the last. Emily tried to scream, but no sound came out. She was trapped, suspended in mid-air with no escape in sight. Suddenly, the clowns began to converge on her. They laughed and cackled, their faces twisted into grotesque expressions of joy. Emily knew that she was doomed. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, Emily heard a voice, a familiar voice. "Emily, can you hear me?" It was her best friend, calling out to her through a walkie-talkie. Emily realized that she had been trapped inside a virtual reality simulation, created by a group of pranksters who wanted to scare her. As the simulation ended, Emily was left shaken and terrified. She knew that the horror she had experienced was not real, but it had felt all too real. But as she walked away from the ride, Emily couldn't help but wonder, what other horrors were waiting for her just around the corner, and would she be able to tell what was real and what was not? As Emily walked away from the ride, she couldn't shake off the feeling that someone was watching her. She turned around, but there was no one there. She tried to push the thought out of her head, telling herself that it was just the after effects of the simulation, but deep down she knew that something was not right. The feeling persisted, even as Emily left the amusement park and returned home. She tried to distract herself with work and other activities, but she couldn't shake off the sense of dread that had settled over her. As the days passed, strange things began to happen around Emily once again. She would see glimpses of the clown masks out of the corner of her eye, and hear whispers in the wind that she couldn't explain. Emily knew that this couldn't be a coincidence. The horrors from the virtual reality simulation had somehow followed her into the real world. Desperate for a solution, Emily turned to the only person who might be able to help, the eccentric old woman who had helped her break the curse of the abandoned amusement park. The old woman listened intently as Emily explained what had been happening to her. She nodded knowingly, as if she had expected this to happen. "You see, my dear, once you've been touched by the otherworldly, there's no going back. The horrors will follow you wherever you go, until you find a way to banish them for good." The old woman then gave Emily a small, intricately carved box. "Inside this box, you'll find everything you need to banish the horrors that haunt you. But beware, the price of banishment may be higher than you expect." Emily took the box and thanked the old woman, unsure of what to expect. She opened the box to find an array of strange objects, a vial of blood, a lock of hair, and a small, ancient-looking dagger. Emily knew that she had to do what needed to be done. She followed the instructions that the old woman had given her, and chanted the ancient words that she had memorized. Suddenly, the ground began to shake, and a bright light filled the air. When Emily opened her eyes again, she found herself standing in the center of a dark and twisted dimension. The clowns appeared before her, more twisted and grotesque than ever before. But this time, Emily was ready. She raised the ancient dagger and plunged it into the heart of the lead clown. With a scream, the clown disappeared into thin air, and the rest of the clowns followed suit. As Emily returned to the real world, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The horrors were gone, and she knew that she had banished them for good. But as she walked away, Emily couldn't help but wonder, what other horrors lay waiting for her in the shadows, and would she be ready to face them when they came? Emily went on to live her life, always with one eye looking over her shoulder, but the horrors never returned. She knew that she had faced her fears and banished the darkness that had once consumed her, but she also knew that the world was a vast and mysterious place, full of secrets and unknown dangers. But Emily was no longer afraid. She had proven to herself that she was strong enough to face the unknown, and that she could overcome any obstacle that stood in her way. And so, Emily continued on her journey, ready to face whatever horrors lay ahead, knowing that she had the strength and courage to face them head on.